You know, the medieval world absolutely excelled at paranoia. I mean, they were masters of it. But what if the things people were so paranoid about were actually happening? Well, let's dive into that. We're going to uncover the surprisingly true stories behind some of medieval Europe's biggest conspiracy theories. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. This quote, it just perfectly sets the scene, doesn't it? For the powerful, daily life wasn't just about, ruling and making decrees. It was literally about surviving until the next meal. The royal kitchen? Yeah, not just for cooking. It was a potential hazard zone. So that's the big question, right? Was all this constant fear just paranoia? A symptom of a really superstitious time? Or was it a completely rational, honest-to-goodness survival strategy? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer is way more shocking than you might think. All right, let's start with the most personal fear of them all, getting poisoned. I'm talking about a threat that was hiding in plain sight, literally right there on your dinner plate. And look, this wasn't some rare one-off thing. Poisoning was a super common political tool. I mean, think about it. Why spend a fortune marching armies across the country when you could just sprinkle a little something extra into the royal porridge? Figures like King John of England were rumored to be big fans of this method, and over in the Byzantine Empire, it was basically a competitive sport. So how do you protect yourself? Well, kings hired royal tasters, and while that might sound like a pretty prestigious title, the grim reality was, well, anything but. The job was exactly as terrifying as it sounds. Yeah, this pretty much sums up their daily routine. It's got a bit of dark humor to it for sure, but this was a terrifyingly real job description. Imagine that. Every single meal was a potential death sentence. So yeah, the king's paranoia, absolutely justified. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. We're moving from personal threats to the massive hidden operations of Europe's most powerful institutions. Now we're talking about conspiracies on a truly continental scale. So when you picture a medieval monk, what do you see? Probably a peaceful guy, quietly copying books, maybe baking some bread, right? Well, the reality was a whole lot more complex. The church was the single biggest institution in Europe, and it needed eyes and ears everywhere. And who better for the job? Monks were literate, they were quiet, and they were trained to observe. They were pretty much the perfect candidates. Yeah, you could basically think of them as the CIA in robes, intelligence analysts with much better handwriting. Behind all the chanting and the candles, monasteries were running a quiet but massive surveillance network. They collected gossip, they reported on scandals in the royal court, they even tracked troop movements. So that old conspiracy theory that the monasteries knew everything, turns out it wasn't wrong. And of course, you absolutely cannot talk about medieval conspiracies without bringing up the Knights Templar. These guys were the rock stars of suspicion. And the wildest part, all those crazy rumors swirling around them, they were actually tapping into something very, very real. So you had people whispering that they were worshiping these mysterious severed heads, like that goat-headed figure Baphomet, and doing all kinds of dark rituals. But what was their real secret? It was something way more powerful and honestly, way ahead of its time. They invented the first real international banking system. They could move money across Europe with an efficiency that absolutely terrified kings. So you see, the Templars' real power wasn't demonic at all. It was financial. It was organizational. Their secrecy wasn't about hiding some dark magic. It was about protecting their totally revolutionary banking procedures. And you have to remember, in an age steeped in superstition, that kind of competence, that was threatening enough to look like straight-up heresy. All right, let's switch gears a bit. We've talked about kings and knights. Now let's focus on the fears lurking within society itself. Specifically, that widespread conspiracy theory about secret pagan cults hiding out in the deep, dark forests. So the church, the villagers, pretty much everyone was convinced these secret cults existed. And here's the kicker, they were absolutely right. But these weren't robed sorcerers summoning demons from the underworld. The reality was something much more human and kind of sad, actually. They were basically illegal support groups for completely exhausted peasants. So when church investigators actually went looking for these cults, this is what they found. Not some big satanic plot. They found stone circles that were still being used. They found burned bundles of herbs and carved symbols that were way older than Christianity. And most of all, they found exhausted peasants just hoping their crops wouldn't fail, hoping their families wouldn't starve. They were just desperate people turning to old traditions for a little bit of comfort and hope. And, this fear had some really tragic consequences. It led to the persecution of so-called wise women and folk healers. I mean, these were the local midwives, the herbalists, but because their knowledge of plants and cures actually worked, it was often mistaken for devil magic. Think about that. Their only real crime was competence. Okay, for our last section, we're tackling what might just be the biggest conspiracy of them all. And this wasn't something run by a few shadowy figures. We're talking about an entire hidden economic system that operated just beneath the surface of everyday feudal life. I mean, check this out. You had organized thieves' guilds that would actually punish members for, unprofessional conduct. You had smugglers who basically sought tariffs as a polite suggestion. And you had moneylenders offering what they called mutual aid, because charging interest was technically a sin. This wasn't chaos. This was a highly organized alternative system. And here is the ultimate irony of it all. The biggest, most widespread conspiracy in medieval Europe was the one that basically everyone was in on. People would publicly condemn it, call it sinful, and then privately use it every single day just to survive. It was the unofficial system that, in a lot of ways, actually worked better than the official one. So when you really step back and look at all the evidence, it becomes crystal clear. From the king's dinner table to a peasant's secret ritual in the woods, from the monastery spy network to that massive underground economy, hidden truths and secret networks were literally everywhere. And that just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The medieval world was just full of these fears that seemed like paranoid fantasies, but were actually grounded in a hidden reality. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Which of our own modern anxieties, our own conspiracy theories, which ones will future historians look back on and say, you know what? They were actually right all along.